with us is project-based learning in online environments. We have a certificate for Stacey. We're so grateful. So you have a certificate
thank you.
as the third presenter at our faculty development. So
Wow,
cool.
nice.
Cool.
Very good, thank you very much. Well, welcome. I'm going to start off by looking and really throwing it back on Lauren, because I got a lot of this idea from Lauren on going through and learning how to do a project-based education system. I think, Lauren, one time you and I were talking about this when you first got here, and so I incorporated it this last spring. I had done it off and on, kind of, and got some good response for it, and so it went really well. I encourage everyone to go to the Islander Online and then to our distance education link. There is, and maybe you can help me out, I think I went to the faculty resources here, and I love, you know, if somebody takes the time on our campus to put something on their website like this, there's probably a lot of good information here. And then I've gone through these portions on the website, and every time I look at these, I learn something to improve my course. So I encourage everyone to go to these things here, because that's how I really came about doing the project online kind of deal. So I'm going to go through the project, the course that we had, and then I'm going to have us look at the course evaluations that we had from the students and how we conducted the course. And then the students actually published papers out of the course and were invited to conferences and won an award for the paper that they did from that scenario. So this is a master's degree class, and it's an online. I want to do more with the undergraduates with trying to go online. But I found that master's students, they don't want to take tests, you know, and they really are, especially my online students, who some have gone on. We've got two that's completed the online master's, has gone on to do their PhD. And so we have those that do their online master's with us, but still focus on doing graduate work and continue on to do their PhD. So we're excited about the quality that we still have, you know, in there, but also focusing on trying to put something together that people can use that are maybe already in the workforce and they're used to project-driven type activities versus read a book, take a test, learn something. They're very project-driven in their workplace. So we can focus on it, and we're the same way. I know that I'm working on something Cindy gave to me, and I did a little bit on it, I put it aside, right? And then you come back, you pull it back up, and do some more, and put it aside. But with typical classwork, you kind of give them something and they get finished with it. And they might not put a good quality time into it because they're going to go on to the next week assignment, and the next week assignment, and the next week assignment. So I find that they weren't grasping it well enough. But if I treated it like a project, then they would realize I've got to learn these early parts to move on to the next parts as I go along. So what I thought I would do is break it down into basically 3 projects. And the way that you think about 3 projects, what do we want at the end of the project, of something to come out of it? Well, in this scenario, we want to have a published, peer-reviewed type paper at a proceedings in a well-known conference. So if you're going to build a peer-reviewed, well-done paper, and that's what the course is built on, then what you have to do is break down each one of the projects to build the paper. So what's your first part of your project going to be? The first part of the project is going to be one where they go in there and they do what? A lit review, right? They go and they learn about, and I made it very close to the project area that I wanted them to cover. this course is called Cadastral Information Design. And what this is about is that if you're going to build anything in the United States, if you're going to preserve anything, if you're going to study the environment, somebody owns that land. Who owns it? A farmer owns it, a hospital owns it, a private land estate. Somebody has the ownership of that property, okay? So I had the students look at how the ownership of that property, that land property, would decide the science that they would use. So I had to teach them all about land ownership. So I have these lecture series that I'm teaching, but their project is something that they're very interested in. In some scenarios, there were two people. One is somebody from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Minnesota. He's up in Minnesota, he's taking the class. And he focused on a project that had to do with something with the Corps of Engineers. And you think, well, the Corps of Engineers, they don't own property, but they dredge channels and they take this stuff and they put it typically on somebody else's property. But they got to get permission to put it on property. So anything the Corps does, it affects property. When things flood and things like that. So he had to start doing the lit review of his portion, but I had to start to explain how property is owned, how property is sold, and things like that. So if I teach this, how do I assess what I taught? Well, in my teaching aspect of things is where I would do a video. Now, in the video series, you would give a video and have them watch the video. Sometimes they're very short in duration, and they could be just introducing the topic. Now, I found that I would extend these videos and have a series of different videos that they could go through and see. And the way that I could assess what they got is to talk to them about incorporating what I talked about in their lit reviews and their abstracts, right, along the way. The thing that we don't have here in Blackboard is our Saba Centra connection. Now, if I launch Saba Centra, I can pull up my Saba Centra classes and we can start seeing those. And those are my real-time classes. The way that I do Saba Centra is I usually do it not concurrent to a class running, but I do it in the evening where people are not at work, or I do it at lunch. So just like y'all are having your lunch and doing this, they'll do it during their lunch hour because if they're like at a federal job, they can't really take away from time, so they'll do it during their lunch hour. And they have their headsets, and they're actually communicating. I would do a little bit of the lecture, that each one of them had to go around and describe their project, right? And what I caught them saying is the words that I had used, because they're like nervous what to say. And I told them, imagine what I just told you, use those same topics, and then have them describe that project. You say, okay, just like Dr. Lyle was saying, somebody owns the land, so in my project, I determined this person owns it. The people who keep the records, and you could see it was a duplication of everybody, kind of following along that path, so I could really see them grasping those concepts and seeing them. And then they did their abstracts and they put those together. Now, one of the things that you don't see here, and I didn't get it built into my Blackboard, and I want to do that, is that here we have graduate students, TAs, that learn to teach at the same time, You get a PhD, but who gave you a degree on how to teach? So, right? So I made them peer review their colleagues' abstracts. Because I said, you're going to send this out to somebody to get it approved for a proceedings. Get used to looking at other people's work. So the first project, they did their lit review, they wrote their abstract, they had some assignments that they turned in, and then I basically had them come into my email, and then I dispersed them out that way, removing their names. I had their names on it where I could still see it, and they just would redline it, sent it back to me, and I sent it to them. And so they would finish with that first project, and they felt like they had really accomplished something. They really had amassed this knowledge about their topic in their area. And that project one was done. They got a grade from me, and they saw feedback from the other students, and they defended their project from that standpoint.
How many students do you have in a class?
This one had 7. I've done up to 17 with this method, and I spread when you talk differently, but I'm moving towards WebEx, which I'm really excited about. Am I saying that right, WebEx? WebEx, which has a different way to communicate. What I didn't like about Sava Centra is I'd ask a question, and you would hear, you would see the raise their hand or the check yes or no would show up on the screen. So I couldn't see like feedback necessarily. Well, I did WebEx for the first time, and I'm talking about something, and I saw somebody go like this. And I said, wait a minute, I just said something they didn't quite grasp. So I took a minute and I said, well, let me explain to you. What I'm talking about is this, and then you can see them like, okay, now I got that. But with this, you get a symbol of somebody clapping, or a check yes or no, or raise their hand, they want to ask a question. You don't really get that personal feedback, so I'm excited about that project. The next portion of the aspect of Project 2 is to now send them down the direction of actually building something and doing something. And one of the things that you want to do is give a good exercise. I mean, what I like to do is like we take the Corps of Engineer guy's example. His example was, over time, the owners of the property change. Because when they take this stuff out of the channel and they throw it up onto the shore, the property grows. So not only do you have a two-dimensional what the property looks like, but the property starts growing in 3 dimensions because they keep putting more soil and building this area. And so his map of what the property looks like grows in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. So he had a very complex problem. He was going to have to go build models and databases and things that he really didn't know how to do. He had a good idea, but he didn't know how to do it. So what I did was go through and give a step-by-step method of how to do mini projects. I said, watch me do it. And I did it on a couple of projects. I made some videos of that project so you can see it. And then I gave them step-by-step ways to how to do it, and for them to turn out a quick report. And I gave that to them, and I actually kind of pushed them to quickly get it done, and it was canned data, and it worked really well. So they learned the tools and the concepts to building the model. So now when they go up to Minnesota, right, as soon as he did the project here, the Minnesota guy started saying, hey, you sent us over here to Texas that had all these data. I didn't know Minnesota's got the same thing. So he started, using those ideas and going from there. So they had a hear me talk about it kind of deal, watching it on the video there. Then they have a concept of how do they tell people about it. Now, before I used to peer review the abstract. Now I said, you need to tell people about what you're doing along the way. We still were having weekly or bi-weekly meetings, and they would go around, where are you with your project? Some would say, to be quite honest, I haven't done anything. I've been too busy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's all right. They're still doing their assignments. But in this scenario, I made them build their own website. All right, everybody should be able to know how to build a website. Go take and throw your stuff up on a website. So I had a video that had them go and build their own website and be able to throw their drawings and stuff onto the website. And that's what they did, and it was a small project. So now they got this concept that, if I build something, if I come up with an idea, do I just publish a paper and put it in a book or a magazine I'd never see it again? But if they put it on the website, they could keep building on it and sharing on it. because that's really a good way. So I was trying to get them to becoming more like building more. I've not gotten them doing this really inside of Blackboard, just because of the logistic aspects. I make them build their own website outside. But imagine one day that we could have them doing that in their own work. I think that it's always good to give them examples of papers of what you're expecting in terms of like published papers or something of that nature. So I would always try to give them examples so they could see some examples of what they're going to look like for specifically their methodologies, their methods and results. So I had them do some quick, on the mini project, I gave them an example of what it might look like. And it was a smaller part of the project that they had before. Let me jump back to it. And so they really enjoyed seeing examples. Now they get to the last part, and there's really not much here towards the last part. Wrap it up and finish your paper, right? Wrap it up and finish your paper. Well, would most of our students wait to the very end, to try to do that? Well, along the way, I made them, and they had to submit the abstract to the group. I mean, they had to go into the conference, and they had emails coming back and forth to them from the conference saying, we got your abstract. You need to register for the conference by this day. Here's, all the stuff like that. So they had to be serious about there was this pressure. They've now got to get a paper done. So they weren't like waiting to the last minute because they knew that this is putting them out front. And it was amazing, especially when I made them do stuff. They had to talk daily about it. They had to put it on the web for people to see. Then they got towards their final paper, all right? And in their final paper, you saw different things from people that did it in the last minute, people that called me and said, I can't get it to work, I had planned to do this. I had somebody that was here in Texas drive down, and they came to my house, and we sat out there in my office, and I couldn't get their data that they had planned this big paper on. They had to withdraw their paper, right? But that's okay, right? That's okay. That it was that process. And trust me, they probably learned more in that class than the people whose stuff worked. Because they struggled so hard to try to get this. They did wait to the last minute. If I would have known earlier, and I think if they would have known, they would have went in a different direction, right? And so there was that caveat from that standpoint. They sent me their last paper, all right? And I gave them a chance for me to edit it, give it back, and then turn it in again for their final paper. So you'll see that they had to do the final wrap-up paper. I was editing things along the way if they ever asked, but I gave them a chance to say, here's an edit, make these changes before I do my final grade, so that they learn about the editing process of things. So from that, then we had the papers that we presented at the conferences. This one, for us as faculty, always, I got to add my name also along with other faculty. I joined some of the additional faculty and had them review it. So when they, I told you they gave me the preliminaries, guess what? I didn't do all the review. I said, hey, your name's going to be on this. You want to look at it? So I made them do their portion. But we got our names on. It just makes my CV grow really nice when I have 6 proceedings. And I try to get them to go to different places at the same time. It helps us, right? It not only helps them, and it helps them that our names are under it, are on their papers. But this guy talked about owning land in Ireland. What it is like to own land in Ireland. And he went through and learned all about owning land in Ireland, and then he built a database. He inherited a piece of land that he didn't know that his family owned in Ireland. Came to him, and he's written it out now, and he went through and he looked and found where the track was, and he found historical maps, and he got all the data he could find on that property in Ireland. And he is managing that property from the United States here using an online web development tool that he built, and he wrote about this property and gathered all that information. So the paper that he wrote is, if you own land in another country, how can you maintain what you own? That's what the focus of his paper was at. And he won an award for it. It was really a well-received paper. The other paper that we had that came out was a high-speed rail line from San Antonio to Corpus here. And she went through and focused on it was going to go through. She had problems finding data, but we found some data way out here along I-10. So she said, well, let's just pretend it's going between here and here, but we have a really good data set and look at that. And it was something similar to what we did together, and she built her model and put everything together. And she took my mini project and kind of expanded upon it. And in doing so, she went through and removed all the land that you wouldn't put a high-speed rail. You wouldn't put on airports, hospitals, cemeteries, schools, anything over $6 million in price, right? So she said, you discount all those properties, well, you will only find certain routes that will go. And so she went through and did that kind of study and presented that paper, and it was well received. Now, John, who was up at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, his project of doing this four-dimensional cadastral system that he did, he actually entered it into a peer-reviewed journal. And his is really complex. And he went through all his portions, and his model that he built was pretty advanced. And based on his paper, let me say this, he entered it into a proceedings, but it got picked up for a journal because he won an award. It was one of those deals that the top ones went on to a journal. And now his paper is one the Corps of Engineers is going to make the standard for the way that they do something in Minnesota based on his idea of how to maintain what we own. He wrote the procedures for what they do out of the class that he had. He lives in Minnesota. He's never been down here. You know, he heard about our degree plan online and came into that portion. So some did good, some did better. Here's obviously the betters. If we look at, all right, well, how did I do? How did I do and how did the class do? If we look at our course evaluation, I got 7 out of 9 for this course to turn in the courses. And, you know, above 3s, you know, above 4s, that's all good, right? Whenever possible, my instructor provided real-world examples. So you got a really high on that. That was important to a lot of people, you know, from that standpoint. Providing helpful feedback on assignments and tests. Mike encouraged me to actively participate in the learning. You know, in online learning, that's going to be difficult. I've never seen that number be very high for me, and that's always a concern from that.
Your definition of high is different. I mean, if it's over 4, that's high, Stacey.
Well, I won't buy that. So let's look at their comments. That's what's important. When the comments. I learned new applications. Dr. Lyle was understanding and accommodating. I enjoyed the real-world problems. Course content, grading procedures, objectives, access to the teacher, videos explaining, respect for students. Okay, those are what you want to see, right? Because that means that the structure, everything went well, right? So those are good. They learned about the topic well, presented a broad awareness. The assignments are geared to real-life situations, videos on the course and the communicating. What things did they like least about the course? Online disconnect. Wish I could meet and work with all professors in person, right? So finding website relative with course, all right? So finding a website that's relative to the course, that is this disconnect between, I think, Blackboard and the course not being perfectly aligned, because I was still doing Saba Centra, right? and that part is not inside a Blackboard, and so there is that disconnect. It's not relative to the course. They would have to go to Saba Centra and get out of Blackboard versus being in Blackboard. So there's this content management delivery. It's not a one-stop shop all kind of deal. I would like to meet as a group a couple of times during the semester to get to know the students and the professor. So there was no conversations. How do you have group conversations online? You could have one-on-one. You stop talking, you start talking. You could go over here to side chat boxes, you know. But some people think that's creepy. So what's the answer there? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that problem. What did they like about me? This one's really nice. I thought I have been at 4 different universities. Honestly, I'd like to say he's one of the top 3 professors I've ever had the pleasure of taking the class with. Dang, I need to put that on my promotion package, don't I? And an understanding of the teacher in person, would recommend him to anyone. Keep up the good work. Continue communicating with undergraduate and graduate students. He's an excellent professor. He always tries to help you at any time. And so I give you my cell phone number. Cindy hates it. I give my home number. You know, they call us at home. It's fine with me. I'm there for them. And we want to try to help. Always been there. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Okay, maybe that was the ones I was always getting on. I look forward to the next class. Thank you for all the questions you had answered. You know, there's some people that I won't hear from. There's somebody that's sending a question every other hour. You know, especially, I'm not really good. I'll start working on Blackboard, filling in content. I'll forget to hide it to the students. And I'll stop here, and I'll go do something else, and I'll get an email, hey, I can't find any of this stuff you started talking about. Oh, wait, that's not supposed to be seen yet. And I have to go back and make sure I click, don't have them able to see that. And that's part of me learning it and problems that I have, you know, from that aspect. But needless to say, I think the project method, you know, if they were questioned about did they learn anything in this course, right? Could I truly say and assess that they did? Obviously from their papers I can see that. But it's a little different from graduate and undergraduate too, right? You know, graduate, they want to learn it. Undergraduate, you got to kind of force feed it to them in some ways. So within our undergraduate, we definitely do week by week assignment, reading, lecture. There's the module, there's learning modules from that standpoint. But I plan to even do this in some of my upper division undergraduate classes compared to my graduate classes, because I thought it went extremely well. You can see from the comments, the societies, the papers that were presented, they were really happy with the quality. Some students could not make their commitment to the conferences, so us as faculty went, and then we did find funding. One student wanted to really go and present theirs. We didn't have funding in the department. We actually found funding from industry. I called somebody up and said, could you pay for this student to go, and we got support that way, and that happens from time to time that we get that. So I just wanted to do a quick concept of the project-based education aspect, and that's all I really had. So.